good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Newsmaker Live with me, Kendall Burton. Tonight, we want to tackle what some might consider to be controversial topics, that is, topics to do with the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. And to help me do that is a very special guest. We have the co-executive director of the local gay rights support group, United and Strong, Kenita Placid. Welcome to Newsmaker Live.
Thank you so very much for having me here.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. You must be a very strong person to take on a system where issues to do with gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender issues are so taboo, and to do it so publicly and so vocally. I want to start by looking at your group, United and Strong, its genesis, its objectives, the support and successes. Let's start with how United and Strong got started.
Well, one of the first things I would probably like to basically correct is when we think about United and Strong, we don't think about it as a gay rights activist group. We are a human rights organization.
Okay.
And whether someone is gay or straight and there is a situation we would be able to help with, we would. However, since most of the human rights lawyers and organizations deal with everybody else but the LGBT community, we have since focused our direction there.
Okay, so first and foremost, you're a human rights group.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that.
One of the things, United and Strong started way back in 2001. And it's an organization primarily formed in collaboration with the Caribbean HIV/AIDS Alliance and the AIDS Action Foundation.
Right.
And this group has been working with men, sleeping with men for the longest period. In 2007, we looked at how we are able to reach the other communities who were not represented. So instead of it just being a men's organization, we have expanded to ensure that we can work with various groups such as the lesbians, the bisexuals, and I mean, number of persons do not quite understand transgender, but in local society we look as cross-dressers. This group have done quite a bit of work under AAF for many years and had been silent for many years. But one of the priorities of United and Strong is being able to reach the community it serves, to disseminate information, to sensitize, educate, and these are the first set of priorities of United and Strong,
and
the community that it serves.
You said you've been quiet for a while. Is there any significant incident or a series of incidents that led to this more vocal United and Strong approach?
I think when United and Strong did the presentation to the Constitution reform in 2009, March of 2009, we became visible. It was the first time that we had actually spoken locally as the organization, you know, in the media. And following that, we did the UPR, Universal Periodic Review at the Human Rights Council. We did a shadow report followed by a NGO statement. And then we realized that there were so many other things that we needed to do. So we actually formed alliances with a number of regional groups, and we have been part of the Caribbean vulnerable communities since 2006. We have been part of the Caribbean Forum for Liberation and Acceptance of Genders and Sexualities since 2006. But, you know, these were memberships that we were not really doing much in. And so we revisited where we were and decided that we needed to have more of a, you know, a voice. We needed to speak up more. We needed to do more. One of the things that also pushed some of our organizing was really and truly losing friends to brutal murders and realizing that we had to be more of a support to each other, for each other, and we needed to inform people, you know, hate crimes, whether it was a hate crime, whether it was an incident, but the brutality of things that happened to those persons were not nice. And so we then started coordinating with each other, being more of a support. So it was not just about health issues, because when the organization started, it was about the HIV epidemic and making sure sensitization and dissemination of information was done. We then started looking into human rights and what it means, how are our rights being violated, what does that mean? So when we look at the transition period between 2000, when we started, it was an idea connected with other groups around the Caribbean who had already started. And I mean, some of the history of Caribbean organizing goes all the way back to 1996, 97. And we actually had persons from St. Lucia who was involved in some of those meetings. So there has been this kind of communication underground saying we need to be able to do those kinds of support. It has always been challenging to do something that is public because the level of stigma and discrimination that is out there, if you're not strong enough, if you do not have a good support system, if you do not have a family who supports you, it certainly can be a lonely world.
Okay, taking into consideration all you just said, how significant in terms of numbers is the LGBT community in St. Lucia?
Well, that's a question a number of people would like to know. What is St. Lucia's population and how many persons in St. Lucia are heterosexual?
So that's your way of saying you don't know.
It's not a way of saying I don't know, but is there any reason that we need to clarify it or justify it with a number to say we are 10% of the population? Or are we 70,000 persons in St. Lucia? I don't think it's, you know, a question as to how big a grouping it is a question like saying, when did you know you were gay? Which I find is ridiculous because when did you know you're straight? Are you straight? You know, so persons, it's a question that people try to put a figure to because they feel that they need to know. And this comes on two things. When we say, one set of people would say gays are pushing things in their face, you know, don't do it and push it in my face. But at the same time, if somebody is gay and do not come out and say, hey, I'm gay or I'm a lesbian or whatever, they feel that they are being deceitful because they are hiding. So there's a lot of contradiction.
Okay, let's put it this way. So I think perhaps maybe some misunderstanding on your part, perhaps. Maybe, okay, would you say that knowing or having an idea, maybe not to put out in the public, but at least for the purposes of your organization, would it help you achieve your objectives a lot more easily if you were able to identify those people, or to say we had X number of LGBT persons in the society that we need to reach?
I think is when we look at the way the society is set up, yes, it would be right. It would be okay to say, okay, if St. Lucia was the perfect place where stigma and discrimination did not run a population underground, we would be able to say, oh, we have 40,000 persons here. But with the idea that the manner in which society treats persons, it's not an easy figure to give, but however, there is an average figure that the organization works with, and there is more or less peer-to-peer communication that indicates to us, and we are able to reach people. And we also work with the diaspora and the region in question, because even with me, for example, I am the Eastern coordinator for the regional organization Carry Flags. And so I communicate with other persons in the region, and sometimes they are able to say somebody in St. Lucia needs assistance, and if we are not aware of this individual, they actually put us in contact with. So it's a figure really and truly that I don't really give out to the public regardless of who asks. Okay,
but you have a figure.
But we have been working with a number of persons. I could give you an average of what we work with.
Okay, perhaps the question could have been better phrased. But as a result of the work that you've done since 2000, 2001, do you think people are more open-minded, more educated, more informed about LGBT issues?
I think when the organization started in 2000, I would actually have to give kudos to the guys who started it. Not all of them are public, so I can't call their names, but it's a great set of guys who started this organization. And Joan Didier and Veronica Snack of AIDS Action Foundation has been tremendous support. Where we were then and where we are now, I think a lot of things has happened, not because of the organization, but because of everything that is actually happening around the world that affects us. The information that is put out on television, that's put out through social media, cases are more openly reported, plus, you know, different sessions. I mean, the Ministry of Health with the National AIDS Program did a great job during the HIV programming to talk about reaching out to MSMs and not discriminating. So I think a collective of, you know, actions have brought persons, but to where we are today. However, I am not sure if we have the correct measuring stick to look at how things have transformed. For some persons it is definitely easier. And for some persons they're still going through a hell of a difficult time.
But don't you feel that the ability, or your ability, the organization's ability to speak so openly, so loudly, is a sign or a symbol of significant progress?
It is definitely. I mean, like, we have been able to come and speak freely on a number of media, in a number of media stations. And I know in some countries, even in the Caribbean, we still have a lot of difficulty even getting a PSA played on television that just speaks to tolerance and, you know, not even acceptance, just tolerance, you know. It's kind of difficult to say where people are at. I know a number of things that has happened. Families had to realize that, you know, regardless of what the child's sexuality is, it's their son, it's their brother, it's in some occasion it's their father. You understand? And they have had to deal with those serious things. Some persons prefer not to. A number of persons revert to the Bible and say they stand with where it is. But you see, with information, I think, and sensitizing, that being gay, being lesbian, being bisexual is not a disease. Because somebody is and is in your company, do not make you one. Because somebody is gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, it doesn't mean that if they're in your company, they're attracted to you. And these are some of the things we have to make clear to persons, that because you are gay, lesbian, bisexual, it do not take away your human dignity. It do not take out the fact that you are a human being. And so the same kind of respect or address you would require for yourself is required for the other person.
Okay, you raised a number of issues that we want to go a little more in depth with, but because of the time frame that we're operating within, we want to move forward. Just this week, DBS aired a story about what some would consider a partial victory in Guyana, with the acting High Court judge there deeming cross-dressing not to be a criminal offense. Locally, the national epidemiologist in response said that the LGBT lobby is gaining momentum, is growing rapidly, and will soon be a major force to reckon with. We want to take a look at that story, and then I want to get your reaction afterwards.
The national epidemiologist says the lobby of the LGBT movement is extremely strong. And Mr. Nahum Jean-Baptiste says, although locally the movement is gathering momentum, it is extremely prominent in countries like Guyana and Russia, where products have been pulled off shelves as a result of conflict over rights.
The other thing is the human rights aspect of it. We have to think and legislate and act within human rights. It's important because, for example, one of the things that we are still grappling with is the buggery law, whereby unless you cut someone in the act, you cannot legislate, and therefore just having that legislation there, forcing gays and lesbians underground and preventing them from coming forward. So to answer your question directly, definitely I believe that sometime in the future it will have some impact if this spills over into St. Lucia.
Mr. Jean-Baptiste says the gay community in St. Lucia is well informed about what's going on around the world. By way of example, he says just recently, for the first time, St. Lucia witnessed a gay rights demonstration.
We would support anything that does not infringe on the rights of persons, whether it be gay, whether it be lesbian, whether it be commercial sex worker, anybody at all. And so we'd have to hope that and also use advocacy to ensure that the rights of persons are not violated in that regard.
The national epidemiologist says it may not be long before the gay community embarks on clearing legal hurdles.
This has been an objective or an issue for discussion at the level at the Caribbean. Most of the human rights and anti-discrimination meetings for HIV and AIDS, to respond to HIV and AIDS at the Caribbean level, this has been an issue in the forefront. The buggery law itself, but also the infringement of rights of minority groups or vulnerable groups.
With lots of hurdles to clear legally for the gay community, some gay persons prefer to stay underground until the legal battles are settled in their favor. For the DBS News World, Alex Bousquet reporting.
Let's get your reaction to that story.
Well, with what's happening around the region and how does it impact St. Lucia? I mean, we heard our Attorney General say that they were monitoring the case in Belize before actually taking action. So there's a challenge to the law in Belize. There's a challenge to the law in Jamaica. They also have a challenge against TV stations for not airing the ads about tolerance. There's a challenge in Trinidad against the immigration law, and there's also a challenge against the immigration law in Belize again. When you look at this along with the cross-dressing case, these things have all been in the making. And when you read the wording of those laws is what we have to be concerned with. So in St. Lucia, we have the fact that the non-discrimination clauses do not include sexual orientation or gender identity. That's one case. We also have the burglary law that says, basically the act is illegal, especially between a man and a man. Specific. And then you have the gross indecency law that says any public sex is illegal. But when in private, if it's a male and female, it's not illegal, but any other person basically falls as it's being illegal within the law. So when you read those laws, you see where it discriminates against a particular set of persons. Now, if our constitution sets precedents as to, what obtains in country, it is a case that at some point you need to review what it says and how it infringes on the lives of the citizens.
So in light of what is happening regionally and internationally, will your organization now be emboldened or seeking to have those laws that you deem to be discriminatory changed?
We were part of the Constitution Reform the call in 2009. We did a submission. So did Akim Lacha as a citizen. So did AIDS Action Foundation. And I think we did pretty good proposals, and we did also the oral presentation, and we are yet to hear this document actually being put to Parliament.
But a lot has happened since that you can use now to form basis for an argument to have it revisited.
A lot is still happening, but unless the government decide, it's just like when you look at the Labor Act, unless the government is ready, nothing happens. So the report sits on the website, and nothing else is happening with it as yet. As to whether United and Strong will challenge any laws, time alone will tell.
Okay, you mentioned some specific legislation that you want to see changed. Are there any others that you would like to see altered?
Well, we are looking at amendments made to ensure that United and Strong is not just about gay lobby. It's like they have said in this, and I'm not even sure if we are a gay lobby. I mean, we simply look after the lives of people and trying to ensure that people are able to live, you know, comfortable lives. But we also participate in issues around youth and, you know, their safety. We also participate in issues around women, you know, and gender-based violence is one of the things that I personally hold close to my heart. And I'm also involved in some feminist movements that also right now has an eye-to-eye project that is definitely looking at the violence around the Caribbean. You know, so it's our work now, although we have our core, the core team really focuses on the community here, we actually have to be able to do the work locally and regionally as we tie the forces. Because, you know, with islands, the one thing that we do understand is it's very easy to have a domino effect, but sometimes it's also very difficult to get that kind of effect.
Okay, now last year the LGBT community in St. Lucia held a major demonstration outside the government buildings at the waterfront. We want to take a look at our second clip in which the former government minister Sarah Flood-Boba reacted to that demonstration, and I'll come back and get your reaction to her comments. Let's take a look. Okay, we don't seem to have that clip ready as yet, so let's move on. Okay, we have the clip. Okay, let's take a look.
The seminar was held under the theme Advancing Social Integration and Intergenerational Solidarity. It highlighted the importance of good parenting, the purpose of marriage, and featured a presentation on how to build relevant families. The event brought together a blend of young and adult couples as well as singles, creating an environment of shared perspectives and a wealth of experience. President of the NYC, Timothy Ferdinand, expressed deep appreciation for the initiative, which annually recognizes the international celebration of family. He says it's coming at a time when society, especially the youth, are bombarded with negatives.
The National Youth Council, together with the Universal Peace Federation, we came together for the second time this year too.
Okay, we want to apologize that you apparently had the wrong story there. But you're talking about domino effects. I want to go back a little bit. This issue of gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual issues, I mean, this is not a new issue. It goes all the way back to the 18th century. What is it about what is happening now that makes you feel more confident that more can be done?
I guess one of the things that happened is that we grew courageous. I mean, my activism as an individual did not start with LGBT issues. I was involved in drug-free and different things before that. And I remember when one of the directors of United and Strong approached me to get more involved in 2006. It was like, I am so not ready for this. And so although I was engaged and speaking with a number of persons, it was not like, you know, take on this kind of work. I never envisioned being the face or voice of the organization. And when that happened in 2009, it was understanding that at the time that it was by request that I ended up doing the presentation, and then I was asked to, you know, continue. One of the things that I faced is a number of the number of gays, especially males, the stigma and discrimination is so much higher in society. And I have done an interview, and the backlash of it is not mine, but it actually happens to persons on the streets. So persons will have more to say. Persons have even gone as much as stone throwing, bottle throwing. And these are some of the things when I listen to people talk about, you know, it's against the Bible and against this, but, you know, are we condoning, are we saying that it's okay to violate those persons because you believe that their actions are against the Bible. And when we allow those violent acts to happen, what messages are we sending? But when it happens to somebody else, we want to say the police needs to do more. This is like a contradiction, and we keep having that happening around things.
I want to build up on what you're saying here, because we didn't get the insert with Sarah Flood Bobrown, but one of the things that she said is that you, by allowing the LGBT community the freedoms that you're suggesting that you be granted, you are essentially endangering the traditional family values, the traditional family arrangement. How do you respond to that?
I think when I heard Sarah Flood Bobrown make that statement, I seriously thought that she should invest some time in some personal analysis of self. However, that is my personal opinion.
Okay, but let's not make it personal.
It's kind of difficult sometimes not to make things personal when persons are making personal stands. And it's not necessarily a human rights stand or organizational stand. I recall having a meeting with Sarah Flood Bobrown while she was still our deputy ambassador in New York. And when I attended that meeting was to understand what is the situation with St. Lucia taking position that actually put the spotlight on St. Lucia at the UN in terms of how we voted. I needed to understand the process in arriving at her votes, whether it was actually direction from capital, whether it was her personal opinions. And by means of what I understand, there were a lot of personal stands taken. How are the gay community or persons of the gay community actually breaking up families? When majority of the time, because of how we react to persons in church and what have you, and the high beliefs that we have, most persons who are churchgoers or believe in most of our religions, if they have a gay child, they either disown them, they put them out, or they send them overseas that people do not know. This is breaking the family. When we look at the history of family in St. Lucia, what exactly is a family? Is it a mother, father, and children, and this is the idealistic view of family? What is the reality of St. Lucia's family life? Realistically, we have a lot more single parents. We have a lot of children who are being raised by aunts and neighbors and godmothers because their parents are trying to make a dollar somewhere else. What is the reality of what actually breaks the family? But when you want to turn it around and not look at the economical issues and not look at everything else and say gays are breaking the family, what is actually breaking the family is the fact that we have a society that levels of stigma and discrimination is so high that one, to avoid it, might decide to get married to live a normal life even if that is not who they are. How about giving it a fair chance and let people be who they really are, accept them for who they are, and let them live the life that they should without causing people to do things that they shouldn't and then cause more turmoil within other people's lives. So if we have to have a true one-on-one, I would love to sit with Sarah and let's look at the true statistics of what really the family is and what's the contribution to the breaking of families.
Okay, you're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS with me, Kendall Burton, our guest tonight, Kenita Placid of the Human Rights Organization.
That's correct.
United and Strong. The lines are open, so you're free to call with your questions or comments. Before we take the calls, you must have heard some of the comments regarding gays, lesbians, some suggesting that there is no gay gene, suggesting that people are not born that way. How do you respond to those statements?
I mean, we live in a world where we still can't understand, and probably people have to go through more in understanding how our genes are able to produce. But you know what? The majority of gay persons I know who by chance have children do not have gay children. However, majority of the people I know who are gay are born of straight parents. So probably they should tell me.
Okay. The lines are open. You're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS. Our guest tonight, Kenita Placid of the Human Rights Group, co-executive director of the Human Rights Group United and Strong. We're talking about what some view as controversial topics. We're talking about gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender issues. What has been, we're going to get a little personal, what has been your own experience in discovering your sexuality? We want, hold that. we have our first call, I believe. Yeah, let's go to the lines. Hi, good evening.
And good night. I'm listening to your program, and the first thing that comes to mind is, as a social studies teacher, I'm straight, I'm not gay. The first thing that comes to mind is freedom of choice. And we need to tolerate people a little more. We need to allow people to express themselves and appreciate them for who they are and stop condemning them. And I think it's a wonderful job. I do not know her name, but the guest that you have,
Kenita Placid.
Wonderful job. So I would like to congratulate her, because I think that it's high time people start appreciating people for who they really are and not how they live. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for calling.
You're welcome.
You want to respond to that caller?
I'd just like to thank her for her, and I hope that she's able to. I mean, one of the things that is one of the biggest battles is young people. And as a young person, they have a number of persons who experiment. It doesn't mean that you experiment with the same sex, you are gay. However, there is a lot of negativity, and instead of giving children information, inform children about sexuality and some of the things your body will go through. Explain to them their body changes and some of the challenges. Not everybody go for it, but some persons really is challenged. Whilst trying to discover all those changes with your body, what's happening. And experimenting is not bad. But however, putting a child into a gay or straight setting as a child, this is wrong.
Okay, we have another call. Good evening, caller. You're on the air.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
The thing about people having a choice, having their own choice, to my opinion, I believe that will get people in a lot of trouble. Now, the thing about being gay, it's just like I have anything wrong with somebody being gay. The problem I have is that, to me, it is unethical, number one, and coming from a Christian value, from the time I was raised, it was man and woman. From time I was brought up, I know that if you're a boy, there's certain things that a boy is supposed to play with, or there's certain things that a girl is supposed to play with. If when you see your child doing things that is going off track from his sex origin, you as a parent are supposed to guide that child accordingly. Treat him as, because what some parents do, sometimes they see the boy dressing like a girl and they are not discontinuing in that trend. But when you see a child or boy doing something wrong, you the parent supposed to train that child properly, that he and she knows their sex origin. And I think again, some parents now, they don't talk to their children about sex. They think that sex is a bad thing. But from what I understood, that you, a boy, you treat your child as a boy. You are a girl, treat him as a girl. And you show him, well, boy was made for girl, girl was made for boy. And as having Christian values, that's something I maintain. And to me, there is no argument in that. Gay is wrong. In a biblical sense, it is wrong. And the way God sees it as wrong, and I will continue seeing it as being wrong.
Thank you, caller. But I think you answered that question before he even called. But you want to elaborate? Yeah.
You see, when we have young people who have very strong imagination and, expressions, how do you determine because this child actually dresses is going to make him gay? Sometimes it doesn't. And so we have to understand how to guide our children without basically psychologically and emotionally damaging them. And it is true, a number of persons don't talk about sex anymore because it's so taboo. But unfortunately, whilst we are thinking about lying to our children about what sex is and who having sex and what, the entire thing about sex, they have picked up from the internet, they have picked up from friends, and they just watch you as a liar, and then you start losing basically trust with your child. So when your child stops listening to you, you wonder why. But basically, children put us through tests. In some things they hear and some things they don't. And conversations are not as free-flowing as it should be. But, you know, how do we change that as a society when we are doing so many things wrong? I mean, a lot of persons would tell me about the biblical and man was made for woman and say a gay is wrong. So is adultery. So is, you know, the number of things that we indulge in and we actually glorify, because the boys, when they have more than one girl, they're the players. But if a girl have more than one fella, she's a slut. I mean, let's be frank. We need to change the double standards. And unless we are all willing to take that internal look and start changing, everything is always going to be, you know, the way it is. The change starts with individuals. It starts with oneself.
Okay, we have another caller. Good evening, caller. You're on the air. Hello. Okay, we seem to have lost that call. The gay movement, or the gay rights movement rather, has been divided. I'm not talking locally, but internationally there's been a lot of division in terms of objectives, the way you go about doing things. Has that been replicated locally? Before you answer that, we have another call. Good evening, caller.
Hello, good night.
Hi, good night.
To me, they should pass a law for all gays.
Can you speak up, please?
I say they should pass a law for all gays. Sometimes you're gay, you shouldn't get no work, no position in society.
Okay, thank you, caller.
It's unfortunate that we still have people who think so, because, you know, a few years ago, the one thing that used to happen, you know, how we used to treat persons who wore dreadlocks. And what he said there just reminded me of that. Because if you wore dreadlocks, it was very difficult for you to get a job. It was very difficult for people to respect you. As a matter of fact, all dreadlocks was actually treated as a criminal for a very long time. You know, so when we talk about we have come from, you know, the lanes of slavery, partially it's true, but mentally for a lot of people, they are still there.
Yeah, obviously, you're saying that your work still is incomplete. You have a lot more work to do.
When these calls come in, it helps me understand how much more work there is left to be done.
Okay, we
Not
have
in
another.
my generation, maybe future generations might have to finish it off.
Yeah, we have another call. Good evening, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening to you and your guests.
Good evening.
I just want to ask a question, because I've been hearing Miss Placid quite often on the airwaves talking about discrimination. I need to understand what sort of discrimination that we, the straight people, have against the gays. Because I see quite a few gay people walking around town. Some of them are dressed as women, and we know them. I'm not going to mention any names. And nobody sends stones or bottles or anything after them. So what, I just needed to explain for me what sort of discrimination that she's speaking about, because I just understand, because I work with a few of them. They're not treated any less than anybody who's straight. They get the same opportunities as me, as a straight person. So I just need to understand what sort of discrimination that she's talking about, and I will listen off her. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your call.
Great. We have different levels of discrimination.
Right.
So actually, we have cases where persons have been actually asked to leave apartments because they are known to be gay. You have persons who have not gotten certain types of jobs because they are gay. You actually have, and the persons who are actually, I'll be quite frank, the persons who are now comfortable and are able to cross-dress and are able to be themselves even in the middle of town, one day ask them the true story of the battle of earning this. Because it's not like it is just given to you. You have a lot of verbal attacks, you have a lot of physical, psychological attacks. I mean, if persons really understand what stigma and discrimination is, they would understand how this can be impacted on someone. Some persons are raised in a ghetto. So, you know me, I'm from the ghetto, you saw me little boy, I am gay. You may not have a problem with me because I know you from time you little boy. However, someone else would get the impact of my hatred or my dislike for this type of person. But you will not touch me. You know, so it's the same way. I could understand a friend being gay, but if it's my son, hell no, it cannot be my son. And these are some people. Some people actually would not talk to their brother, would not talk to their son if they are gay. But they have people they know that are gay that they speak fine with.
Okay, we have another call. Good evening, caller. Hello. Okay, we lost that call. Yeah. We're due for a commercial break. We'll take that break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Kenita Placid, the co-executive director of the human rights organization United and Strong. We'll be right back.